Welcome everyone to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday Creator Convo. I'm Noelle Marshall, and I am, along with my husband, Bob Warner, we are the stewards of the Co-Creators Convergence. And Bob, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for being here, Geraldine. Phil, thank you so much for bringing her into this conversation circle. Really looking forward to the evening and also benefiting all those that will watch this recording on the Co-Creators Convergence website when we put it into our archives, along with the 250 other recordings we have of amazing people in this world sharing their gift to humanity. Geraldine, thank you for bringing yours.
Wonderful.
So
Thank
much
you,
for
Bob.
having me here.
And thank you everyone who's here so far, and those of you that will be picking this up later, and those of you that are going to be listening on one of about a dozen different Facebook pages. So we have some new faces here, and what I'd like to do is to just play a very short video to tell you about the Co-Creators Convergence, which is a wonderful just kind of group that has no hierarchy and no membership, and we just have been hanging out for about 10 years. So hold on 1 second, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the Co-Creators Convergence. So let me tell you about Phil. Phil was featured in a documentary, The Indigo Evolution. His passion, enthusiasm, kind spirit, sparkling wit and intelligence, which we know so much about, and now we know that he's a comedian. He is acknowledged as an expert and an authority over an ever-increasing range of fascinating subjects. That's why we're going to have Phil back over and over again. He has spoken at the United Nations, and he is co-author with James Twyman of the Kabbalah Code. He's available for private consultations as well as personal mentoring. And I will put his email and contact, as well as he did a talk with us. The last thing he did with us was the continuing saga of the Indigo Children. So I'm going to put that information in the chat for you all to pick up. And Phil, thank you so much for bringing Geraldine. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm sorry for the little technical glitches we've had there, but we carry on, and I'm looking forward to such a fascinating evening, because Geraldine is bringing so much. So thank you everyone for coming.
Hi, Phil here. Yeah, that's a very impressive bio. I wrote it. Anyway, I'm really happy to be back here again and introducing Geraldine to everybody. I had forgotten that I had brought Geraldine to your attention, to the attention of the Co-Creators Convergence. I feel like the proud father today, you know. But no, this is a real honor. Geraldine, I'm going to read from your bio. You can expand on it, Geraldine, okay? I think I have the short version, but I have it pretty much memorized. Oh, by the way, you know, when it says in somebody's bio, that they've spoken at the UN. Just so you know, in the basement, adjacent to the gift shop, there's a little room where the NGOs have their meetings, you know. And I've spoken there several times. They have a lot of groups, you know. I think it was the friendship group at the UN that invited me to speak. So, but technically you have spoken at the UN. I don't want people to think I spoke for the Security Council or anything. Maybe one of these days. But anyway, Geraldine, this is when they asked me if I would recommend someone to be a speaker for the Co-Creators Convergence. Geraldine, there wasn't anyone who came close, really. That I was just excited to be able to facilitate Geraldine being part of this Co-Creators Convergence. Geraldine, she's the founder of hybridmothers.com. This is an international research and support group for experiencers, hybrid parents, interdimensional phenomena, right? Hypnotic regressions uncovered a lifelong history of abduction and participation in human hybridization with 24 hybrid children, as 24 and counting. 24 hybrid children is the result. She's now dedicated to dissemination of knowledge, and don't we know this, of hybridization programs, research, commonly held dogmas of the human genetic timeline, historical records, human structure. Her story is now part of a 16-part winning documentary called Extraordinary: The Seeding, focusing on the human ET hybridization program. Geraldine is just, she is, all of these things I write about myself, I could easily say about Geraldine. She's just amazing. I'm almost at a loss for words sometimes, except to say, please welcome Geraldine Orozco. Hi, Geraldine, really great to see you.
Hi, Phil. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much to Noel and Bob for creating such an amazing platform. I didn't know about this before, and I'm so glad I know about it now. So I'll definitely be joining some of your future events. Yeah, so thank you for that. So today, I guess we just jump right in. I think, you guys know enough about me. But I am a clinical hypnotherapist. I became a clinical hypnotherapist as a result of a very powerful life change that occurred to me. I'm going to briefly share that story with you. In 2013, as a product of years of meditation and working and deprogramming, I began to ask very intense questions like, what is love? What is the meaning of love? What is the meaning of the emotions and the experiences that we have as humans? Why do we have certain patterns of experiences in our life experiences? And where do they originate from? So I began to kind of do an internal study, and that began to, as a product of meditation for many hours in a day. Excuse me. And as a result of that work, I began to dive into the realms of the subconscious mind. And I began to explore a little bit more about the networks of information that interconnect us within a field through the subconscious mind, belief systems, programs, going back generations, going back to my ancestor lineage. And I began to understand and see the picture of a completely different realm of reality that I had been aware of before that. And it was at that moment in 2013 that I experienced this life-changing experience of contact, where these beings came into my room with light. Or they didn't come into my room, but a big white light entered my room. And I was woken up at 3:33 in the morning. And when I go to the window, I look outside the window, and I am drawn out of my bedroom in front of this light and taken on board craft. And on this craft, I am introduced to children that are my own. I can recognize myself in them. And as I connect with them, I begin to have all these memories of experiences that I had with them throughout my entire life since the age of 5. And I began to understand these marker memories, what we call in the support group, marker memories of experiences since the age of 5, 16, 21, 22, 24, very powerful life experiences that I really didn't understand. I didn't know how to link it to my everyday life experience. And so this resulted in the activation of psychic abilities. And the psychic abilities were so intense that I had to stop working. I had a very high end event planning company alongside teaching meditation for corporate companies. And I had to leave that for about 3 months in order to kind of figure out how to manage these psychic abilities and understand how to work with them in my everyday life. But it was through those 3 months that I began to, in my meditation, go even deeper into the realms of the subconscious mind and to begin to explore my own multidimensional body, having this psychic ability. And I began to understand the complexities of the chakras, the interconnection of network of energy system in the body, how energy flows through the body, how we emit energy, how frequency is emitted, how the subconscious mind plays a role in literally the blueprint of what we are as this interconnected system of DNA, which is writing this beautiful vessel that we reside in, and how it connects with our life experiences, contractual agreements, ancestral connections. It was then that the links started to make sense. All of the deprogramming that I had been experiencing in those months, now I had a visual for how that actually looked. And I also began to, when I work with my meditation clients, begin to understand how you can see the difference of a body that is running fluidly life force through their body and a body that is sick and not moving life force through their body. So all of this kind of began to integrate. And in 2017, I decided to get hypnotherapy in order to make sense of some of the experiences that I still had not understood from childhood. And in these hypnotherapy sessions, I began to channel information, channeling in a sense where I began to travel into the realms, into higher dimensions, beginning to explore and furthering my understanding of our connection, how we manifest in these realms, and the structure of our multidimensional body, now beyond just a physical vessel. And I began to understand, or at least begin to look at an understanding of what it is we exist in. Okay. So it took many years and many existential crises with massive amounts of information, not only about DNA, holographic DNA, how we come to be, the soul, the purpose of the soul in this physical body, and the roles that we play as humans, especially when we leave the body in dream state or in the astral plane, or when we are having interdimensional contact, like I was experiencing. So these things began to form a very clear image of what it is that the roles that we play. So from here began the journey of really working with people in helping them. I became a clinical hypnotherapist to help support others that are on the journey in order to help them reach the subconscious mind. Because what it taught me is that the subconscious mind is actually the most important part of this human experience, that we need to somehow break patterns, repetitive patterns that we inherit through families, ancestral lineage, social engineering, and just the structure of this matrix in which we exist. As we begin to break those patterns, what emerges is the observer, is the true self, this expression of infinite potential. And this is where things start to get very exciting. This manifestation of infinite potential, there are certain laws. We abide by certain laws of nature. And when this organism comes into its optimum expression, its optimum balance and coherence and homeostasis within the body, that we can begin to activate the higher faculties, including the movement of our body, which is actually a vortex. And we can begin to move and transcend archetypal aspects of ourselves that we have been cyclically incarnating in different lives in order to learn, to experience. We can even transcend limitations of your astrological sign, for example, or celestial influences that we feel might hinder us. And it is such a powerful understanding that in this moment, you begin to understand what it means to become a co-creator, a true co-creator, that now you have the ability to master matter. You are no longer a product of your environment, but you are a creator. And this is where we come into the topic of understanding our oneness and what does it mean really to be this? What is holographic DNA? So I'm going to share with you just a couple slides out of a presentation to share with you some of these concepts that are very, very, very very interesting. And this little presentation, let's begin to talk a little bit about how we are unified in this universe. We are unified, and the expressions of unification that we are so many. There are infinite. This is just a couple of them that I'm going to share with you that are really truly mind-blowing. Now, within our bodies, we produce iron, right? And within the heart, we have these cells that are producing the hemoglobin. And it's the hemoglobin that is actually producing the iron that runs through the body that creates the blood flow, that creates the life and irrigation and health and balance in the physical body. Yeah, so this little cells that are created in the heart are actually pumping and creating iron. But how is iron created? Iron actually is created in the universe. We are not the only ones that are creating the iron. It's actually created in the universe by supernovas and massive stars. And the way that it is actually created in the universe is by the collision of these stars. That when these massive stars and supernovas are colliding, they are actually creating these particles of iron. Okay, so if it wasn't for this function in the universe, I mean, we ourselves would not even exist. Now, in the process of the collision of these stars, the moment that they begin to go through these explosions and, clashes, they create these incredible models of disks, spinning disks. They become vortices, right? Which essentially become these black holes. And it is this incredible centrifugal energy that creates this magnetic pool. But this magnetic pool has actually a certain form in our universe. And we actually, this picture behind here is a picture of what's called Laniakea, which in Hawaiian, it means immense heaven. It means open skies, wide horizons. And these are runways in which these star collisions are occurring and moving. The way that they move through these runways, there is an intelligent order to that movement that is magnetically and gravitationally pulling each other through this runway. Now we have a fractal of this exact same movement in our heart. Okay, so it's really beautiful to understand how we are fractals of this universe. And this is just one example of many, 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 how we in our physical bodies hold mathematically, physically fractal design of this universe. And we are interconnected in this way, in not only in how the runway of energies are moving through our physical body, but as a human race, we are interconnected by a field. And this field provides this intelligent order, just the way this Laniakea is moving intelligently organized life force. In our physical bodies, we also have runways of life force that are intelligently designed to run energy through. And we see these same models in nature, in patterns of movements of birds. We see it in the mycelium networks underneath trees. We see them in the way that weather patterns are moving through the planet. I mean, we can go on and on about how patterns are moving, not only ourselves, but internally within our physical body. So, some of how we experience this field that I'm going to talk about right now, this morphogenetic field, which creates an instruction manual. For example, the beating heart, when we are in coherence, heart begins to beat at the same rate. Plants that grow are syncing up these spiral flat fractal design patterns that are being expressed in the same way that in our body cells are being created. And another example is when women menstruate at the same time when they come in groups together. Okay, so there's this incredible unseen force that interconnects all of us. Now, what is this morphogenetic field? The morphogenetic field is it is a field in which all living organisms exist within it. All living organisms, and the blueprint of this interconnection is, of course, our DNA. More on that in just a moment. But the fields are responsive and effective to bioelectrical and biochemical stimuli. Okay, because I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more in a moment, but we are bioelectrical, meaning that in the same way that we are moving the life force in the universe, in our bodies, there's an order to how life force and a pool, contracting and expanding forces within our body as well. Individual families, culture, races, nationalities, and groups of people, even how they group together, are also organized within this field, and they participate in larger fields in the same way that the organs in the body have their own fields. In fact, our entire body is made up of vortices, fields, spinning vortexes of life force that come together to create this physical body as one organism. And all of this is written within our DNA, the DNA, which can actually be edited in vivo, how we are experiencing and being affected by our environment. So our body, in a sense, is very much holographic. DNA functions in a way that correlates with holographic projection in such a way that DNA projects the blueprint for the organism that is transmitted from the electrodynamic to the molecular level. So research strongly suggests that DNA functions as a biocomputer, but it's even more than just a computing system, because what drives this system from this organization emerges consciousness. And even though we are made up of programs and patterns, the incredible potential that the human has of co-creation is a product of this emergence of consciousness, which is the activation of these higher faculties. So this DNA wave biocomputer reads and writes genetic codes and forms holographic pre-images, biostructures. So we are more fundamentally electromagnetic than chemical beings, even though chemicals do also play an important part in this physical body. Here's another example of how we are holographic. The cerebral cortex operates like a hologram. The entire brain and cerebral cortex is superfluous in a way. It means that it doesn't have an effect on the brain. There have been many tests on the human that operates perfectly without the brain or even an injured brain. There was a test where they have removed almost 80% of a brain of these little mice that were trained to go down a maze. And as much as they would try to remove the brain, up to 80%, the little mice still remembered how to move down this maze. So what that's telling us is that memory obviously is not just stored in the brain. It is in fact an entire interconnected system that is storing memory. And we store memory in the nervous system, in the muscle system, and every different layer of the body, including the organs, are storing data and memory. So this interconnected holographic field is really like it functions essentially like an editable computing system, as this incredible dear friend biologist Peter Garayev, who was actually one of the groundbreaking researchers that brought the whole concept of holographic DNA into the field, and was the one of the only, well, the first person for me to discover, when I received the download of holographic DNA, to explain it in a way that was, through science, what we are. So we can equate DNA as a language. Linguistic studies reveal that the sequencing of these codons of the non-coding DNA follow the rules of some basic syntax, meaning there is a definite structure and logic in the sequence of these triplets. Like a biological language, research reveals that the codons actually form words and sentences, just like our ordinary human language follows grammatical rules. So in an example, we can transfix the spacing between the letters in order to create different meanings. And this is how we can begin to think of DNA sequence of a gene as a sentence made up entirely of the three-letter words. In a sentence, each three-letter word is a codon specifying a single amino acid in a protein. So those are the examples of how that is. But even further, there is an entire study about how language can have actually emerged from DNA in the same way as a blueprint of human speech, because we are now talking about the mechanics of co-creation. We're talking about vibrational frequency that creates form, which then creates meaning, which of course we process as meaning. We apply meaning to those vibrational emanations, but each vibrational emanation creates a certain form. And there's an entire study. I can suggest a book called Cymatics. And I'm so sorry, I cannot remember the writer of the book right now, but I can post it down below later. But he does an entire study of how vibrational frequency creates form. And from form, we begin to understand the patterns of meaning that are produced by this form through the vibrational frequency. And we see this in art, we see this in language, we see this in body language, and in the way that we express and heal. So Garayev utilized DNA codon sequences using a modulated laser light to reprogram DNA. So from the grammatical syntax of the DNA language, they were able to modulate coherent laser light and even radio waves to add semantics, which means meaning, to the carrier wave. So to reprogram in vivo DNA, a living organism, they were even able to grow limbs, grow back limbs in the body, regenerate organs, heal the body. But in this same way, spoken language can be modulated to the carrier wave. This is how we are able to do pranic healing. This is how we are able to do Reiki and long distance healing. And our DNA, essentially, only 2% of this DNA is writing the actual protein that's writing our physical body. The rest of it is actually what has been called as junk DNA. So in this dark DNA or junk DNA is actually where we find the instruction manual, the intelligence that tells the finger grows up until this point and then it stops growing. So this is how we begin to formulate this instruction manual, which we exist within. We exist within this field. So let's talk a little bit about what is in this field. In the field is an expression of biochemical, bioelectrical producing the physical vessel. But all of this is a holographic projection from the information that comes from our DNA. And within the DNA, through studies of out-of-body experiences, people that have near-death experiences, and through hypnotherapy work, we begin to uncover that the human has experiences. Even at an early age of 5, for example, children are born with memories, sometimes of past lives, or memories of themselves existing in other dimensions, perhaps as other beings. And this is a very wonderful way to understand how information is processed through the physical body at the time of birth. But all of this information of everything that we have been and everything that we can become is actually available to us because it is encoded within our field, within the non-visible field, processed through the subconscious mind and emitting through the body as electrical currents, vibrational frequency. And we can access this information by deprogramming limiting belief systems in order to access the center core generator of this information. We are a vibrational frequency. And this vibrational signature that we emit as a whole, everything that I am, that you sense and feel from me, is a product of everything that I have been programmed with, experienced, processed, and am projecting. And a lot of the times, humans, we wear masks. You know, we are wearing, in a sense, personalities, identities, and actually those things are a product of our programming. They are a product of oftentimes survival mechanisms that the human incorporates in order to navigate our experience. If we are to deprogram all of that, you begin to see that there is an observer. There is a center within that is actually completely neutral. It is the observer that does not identify with any of those personalities and masks, and it actually becomes the generator of life force through the body, through the deprogramming, through the mastering of the nervous system, bringing a homeostasis in the physical body, can actually begin to move the life force through the body in a way that is very productive. And in this way, when we begin to access this process, we have the ability of beginning to activate the higher faculties. Okay, we activate most of us are operating in the lower chakras, the lower chakras that are help us navigate the physical realm. The physical, emotional, psychological realm is primarily processed through the first three chakras, through the endocrine system, and through all of the primal aspects of ourselves, the survival mind. So when we begin to activate the higher faculties, such as the heart, the throat, and the third eye, we begin to activate the higher faculties, our intuition. We begin to activate the pineal gland, and we begin to access the ability to leave the body in a way that is productive. In other words, our dream state becomes more productive. You become lucid in dream state. And this is one of the most important parts of our human experience, because we live many lives simultaneously in these dream states. We access many dimensions in which we are expressed. And this is the realm of experiences of contact, interdimensional contact, future lives, what we think of as past lives, are all simultaneous lives in which we exist simultaneously. So we can access all of this information. And the interesting thing about this that I discovered through my own personal work is that when you begin to deprogram the programming of this current life, you can actually begin to access your past lives or simultaneous lives. And what you'll discover is that we are running through patterns, repetitive patterns of programming, not just in this lifetime, many, many lifetimes. And within those lifetimes, we discover networks of family members. We recognize our mother, we recognize brothers, sisters, coworkers, neighbors in these realms, because we are cycling and we are interconnected through resonance. Even our families come together through resonance in this network. And the interesting thing about this, let me just move forward here because I want to share something else with you. The interesting thing about how the body attaches to the physical body is that when the soul actually attaches to the physical vessel, it is connecting to our DNA, which is encoded with the ancestral data, all the information of the family members and the ancestral lineage, the ancestral traumas that we are programmed with. We have the ability of deprogramming that. And those are the patterns that we begin to find in other timelines as well. Simultaneous lives in which we are also repeating similar programs. So essentially, what I'm trying to get at is that the process of becoming one is can be in a way simplified by deprogramming the programs, suffering, limiting belief systems. All of these are manifested in the body as blocks that hinder the life force moving fluidly from the higher realms into the lower realms of the physical body, shifting the vibrational frequency of the body as a whole. So, as we begin to deprogram these, we actually have the access to the higher faculties of the body, which allow us to navigate interdimensionally. We are very much interdimensional beings. And it is important for us to begin to navigate interdimensionally to learn how to navigate. So, what are the mechanics of navigation in interdimensional travel? Primarily, we need to understand a little bit about energetic hygiene. A lot of the programs that are hindering life force moving through the body are actually participating in creating the vibrational frequency and resonance that we are emitting. Furthermore, they block the ability of your life force to spin through the body. So the runways of life force that move through the body create vortex spin because you are a vortex. And the way that life force moves through the body is functioning in kind of a braid movement of life force that when there is any blockage, let's say the belief that we are unworthy in some way, subconsciously, literally creates inability to move life force through the body. And it also creates a resonance frequency for your entire organism multidimensionally. So that means that you are stuck in this program and repeating that life expression over and over again. So if we are able to reach that subconscious belief and deprogram, we begin to move life force fluidly through the body. And what that does is that it allows you to um, through the activation of the higher faculties to navigate these realms, to see, to have intuition, and to be able to interact interdimensionally. We are constantly moving interdimensionally. We are constantly having things around us, moving in and out of dimensions. And every single experience through your waking state is an opportunity for reintegration. What does reintegration mean? It means becoming one. Every single you look at this lattice, and the universe is expressed in this field, which is the morphogenetic field, which extends out into the universe, or what we perceive as the universe, is also a movement of life force in that same way. Again, as above, so below. So if you look at this network, every single one of these dots, for example, is a fractal of one another. And every single dot, we exist within all of these dots. So as we awaken and begin to navigate higher dimensional planes, we begin to access ourselves in this network of information. This is what it means to activate DNA, because essentially in this field, we are interconnected with this network. So as we begin to activate our DNA, we access fractal aspects of ourselves, and essentially we become one. Moving that network that I showed you is in this little cube that I'm showing you here. We literally have that entire network within the body, within fields, within fields. And we are cycling through what we call the reincarnation cycle, um, in a sense, aspects of ourselves are continuously repeating these patterns until one of these aspects begins to come into a state of self-awareness. That self-awareness is the deprogramming work, the activation of the higher faculties in order to begin to become aware of yourself in more than one dimensional layer. So we begin to reintegrate these fractal aspects of ourselves. And essentially, this is how we can experience that oneness with the whole, with the whole. So I know that there are some questions. I'm going to stop right there just so that we can kind of regroup and make sure that we're kind of on the same page. And Phil, if you have anything to comment on or add, you can do so.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my video back up. But in the meantime, I love what you said about that every moment is an opportunity for reintegration.
Yeah.
That was so profound. You know, Rudolf Steiner, I think other mystics have taught us that our movement is always towards grace. Our movement is always towards a state of grace. And I wonder if that movement towards grace is really towards self-organization.
Mm.
That there is an operating intelligence, right? In the cosmos. There is what we experience as chaos when we move above it, when our view is a little more higher exalted, then we see the order, the higher levels of order within the chaos. It's only like at ground, and from the ground that things look very confused, like you learn with the cymatics. That was Hans Jenny, the early cymaticist, and then you had Victor Kolodny, then you had Sir Guy Manners. And I think studying that the cymatics gives you an idea when you raise the frequency. Remember, it looks very, very busy, but only because the consciousness, the morphogenetic field, is reordering itself to a higher level of organization. So, and I think you're right on target. I'm trying to get my video back.
Yeah,
Which
we
I
don't
think the whole object here is to become conscious co-creators, right? To, through the subconscious mind, to heal these unresolved subpersonality fragments, shadows that block us, and achieve true physical mastery over the ascension process, right?
exactly, yeah. And I guess the beauty,
Yeah.
as you said about becoming self-organized, I think that is actually the key, right? Because um, even in our physical bodies, we chemically create negative charge in the body when we are stressed out, when we are having all of these, you know, triggers within the physical body. And they not only do they hinder the expansion of life force in the body, but we literally cannot move life force through the body. And the way that we spin, because we are a vortex, literally begins to slow down. It becomes sluggish, slow, to the point where, if it stops, we essentially die. And normally the path on that journey, illness emerges in the physical body. And this is going against the natural flow of life force through the body. So to align with nature is actually to align with this self-organized pattern in which naturally we come in to coherence, we come into the most expansive flows of energy through the body, health, vitality, and the body naturally begins to function in a way that is the most productive expression. So it's a really beautiful understanding of your existence here as a human, that there are many ways to exist. There's no right or wrong. You are very welcome to experience suffering and these repetitive patterns, but also there's a way to experience the human experience in a way where we are co-creating. And the mechanics of co-creation come into play when we begin to learn how to activate this physical body. Through deprogramming of these patterns, we begin to clear the runways of life force through the body, and we can transmute. So essentially what is occurring is a transmutation process. You are transmuting lower. To deprogram means to take the lower vibrational frequency programs into a higher. And that process literally creates the release of these stagnations in the body, which are physical and etheric, because they exist. Because I see this in my clients every single day, interconnected with the organs, the layers and tissues of the body, and in the field. And sometimes in those fields are interconnected past lives, these simultaneous expressions in which we are repeating this same pattern. So the healing process can be very powerful. And if you reach the root of these, which exist in the subconscious programming, you can really begin to expand your awareness, not only in this lifetime, but in these higher dimensional aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, there's a great metaphor for the interconnectedness of all things in the morphogenetic field. In the Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra, it's called the Avatamsaka Sutra. This is beautiful. This is Indra's net, Indra's web. It's far away in the heavenly abode of the great god Indra. There's a wonderful net which has been hung by some cunning artificer in such a manner that it stretches out indefinitely in all directions, in accordance with the extravagant tastes of deities. I like that. The artificer has hung a single glittering jewel at the net's every node, at every crossing point in the net. And since the net itself is infinite in dimension, the jewels are infinite in number. And there hang the jewels, glittering like stars of the first magnitude, a wonderful sight to behold. But if we now arbitrarily select one of these jewels for inspection and look closely at it, we will discover that in its polished surface, coherence, right? The surface has to be polished, has to be clear. There are reflected all the other jewels in the net, infinite in number. Not only that, but each of the jewels reflected in this one jewel is also reflecting all the other jewels, so that the process of reflection is infinite. One of the things I love about this, and when we talk about creation is holographic or hologrammatic, yes, in interference patterns that create the hologram, in order to reconstruct the wholeness out of any piece of a hologram, you need coherent light. The light has to be coherent in order to construct the whole out of any one of those pieces. And I think this goes right to what you were talking about, that these things, these blockages that don't allow us to have this coherence within all the different levels of our being, in order to understand the wholeness, there's got to be that level of coherence.
Exactly. And how do we create coherence? So coherence is the congruent between thoughts, actions, intentions, and this is actually where most of us we get stuck, because um oftentimes, we have certain intentions to do things, but the subconscious mind is actually what projects and creates your reality. So if you're unaware of the things that you have in the subconscious mind, let's say you're avoiding parts of yourself, truths, it's difficult to see truth, it's difficult to embody love, it's difficult to forgive, all of these kinds of very simple limiting belief systems that really hinder the ability to have to act and behave in a coherent manner. So these are things that have to be coherent. And so the observation of the self every moment of the day is essential to breaking these patterns. Okay, so checking in with the way that we are speaking, expressing, acting, choices that we're making. And this process sometimes can be very difficult, because the moment that we begin to observe, you have to face the truths of all of the unconscious before moments that have brought you to this one moment that maybe a lot of people find themselves in, like, how did I end up here? Well, we've been sleeping, we're in hypnosis the majority of those times, we're not really aware of the choices that we're making. And what is driving us is the survival mind and the mechanism to preserve and protect the ego self, which is in a constant state of suffering and survival. So the moment that we begin to address those, we can begin to move into more coherent ways of being. So we are so deeply interconnected within this field, within the morphogenetic field, that there are so many ways that we can talk about this, but um, essentially what we are manifesting in our lives, free will really only comes into play when we are embodying conscious awareness and when we are deprogramming from these programs, because otherwise we are essentially these biocomputers that are inputting, outputting repetitive data, So this is important to understand because, well, many of us think, oh, I'm free, I make all my choices, I know exactly what I'm doing. But when we really begin to review a lot of these things, we are just repeating things, and a lot of it is out of survival. So one of the most powerful things to do is to get those patterns and begin to gently, dissolve the limitations that we have, the fears around breaking those patterns. And this is where we can embody and begin to access co-creation. The process of co-creation is in a state of neutrality, that 0 point that I talk about a lot on my channel. But in order to enter into a 0 point, it is the observer, the one that is observing all of these interactions in the present moment, not in the past, not in the future, in the present. This presence literally begins to move your life force through your body. Your vortex begins to spin. And the vortex spin, from this presence emerges love, emerges this bliss state. And it's that bliss state that creates the activation of this higher functioning self. And there is a geometry to the body, that the way that this vortex is moving in the body begins to create this spiral of life force through the body. And this is where the Merkaba is a product of how that life force is moving in the body. And what happens is that the body becomes healthy. Illnesses begin to heal. Or if the illnesses are incredibly advanced, the power of the mind, I am a strong believer that we can heal illnesses. And I've worked with many clients that we have healed. So it really depends on what you believe in. But at best, you will lessen the effects of illnesses in your life and begin to access this co-creation ability where you can manifest things into your experience. And these are not just conceptual things. These are things that we actually can experience in our everyday life. So are there any questions about what I talked about holographic DNA?
Okay, yes, there are. I'm going to add Maureen here and Tish and let them speak to you directly. They had a few comments. Maureen had a few comments, and then I will add Tish. So here you go. And Maureen, can you unmute?
Well, hi, I'm delighted to be here with you all, and particularly resonant with Geraldine's information, because that is the basis of the work I've developed. And so, yeah, I know more about that at the moment, but more about that soon. And in the moment, I just am grateful, to the point of view and the information, the way, you've laid it out so beautifully. And I understand what you're talking about. So I'm very grateful. Yes. Hooray.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much, Maureen.
Yeah. So there's nothing really to say, but thank you so much, Noelle.
Very much.
Okay.
Anybody else have a question?
Okay, go ahead. Tish, you can unmute.
Tish, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Geraldine. It's me again.
Lovely to see you.
I wonder if you could filter my experience, and I'm calling it here in this body, regarding a modification that I had to my body that started the autoimmune spiral that I've been in and have been working towards shifting out of with not that great of success, intermittent success. Just to remind you, when I was around in my 30s and started having all the lost pregnancies, my blood type was changed from O positive to O negative. And then after that, I went from being very healthy, athletic, and all of that, just to cascade for 25 years of autoimmune illnesses. And I guess my question, the meta question is, the small question is, does that make sense? Because human medicine says that's not possible. And then my meta question is, if I'm constantly here in this body, being meddled with still, do I have to constantly heal, or is there any way to, save myself and be sort of in a way genetically immune to tinkering? It seems like I've got a lot of things. Well, okay. I did have serious conversations with myself in terms of my dream and my consciousness and my travels, saying, do not take illness with you, because I'd started doing that. I started being disabled in my lucid dreaming, and I fixed that, and I have amazing other lives and amazing other experiences. But here I feel like I'm in a war between thinking that there's a purpose that my illness serves here and spiritually, and also just desperately wanting out of it because I'm in so much pain and being so disabled. So I feel like, is there like the silver bullet that even if I'm being tampered with still would protect me? That's it. That's a long question. That's why I didn't write it in chat.
Yeah, but thank you so much for that question. I know it's super important. And I know a lot of people are in this state, but what it really comes down to is our belief system. And that's something that we really need to understand. We hold very tightly on to the physical manifestation of the physical body and the experiences. And we even hold on to the meaning that we apply to our interdimensional interactions. Now, this goes into a little deeper topic, but what we experience in the higher realms is a reflection of everything that we believe subconsciously in the physical body. Okay. So in order to shift, let's say, the meddling that we're experiencing, we really need to just completely focus on our understanding of what it means to be an empowerment. What does it mean to have power? What does it mean to embody power? Okay. So, and that needs to go into a deep understanding of the mechanics of co-creation once again, because how the physical body is an expression of subconscious belief. If we strongly believe that illness can completely take over the body and we are somehow victimized by the illness, and more so, remember that illness is a product of emotional traumas that are passed down through generations. We need to get to that emotional root that has to be addressed. Where did we take on the illness? What's the reason? Most of the time we take on illness to protect, to preserve, or in order to create scenarios that we think are going to bring us closer to what we desire, but actually take us farther from it, right? So the thing is that we access that emotional root and begin to deprogram the beliefs around that and strengthen the core understanding of yourself in this physical body, the choices that we made, the families that we've come into, why we experience what we experience, not just interdimensional, because interdimensional is a projection of everything that we're experiencing here and vice versa. Okay. So again, our bodies, mind, that has to come to that congruency that we talked about earlier, because that congruency is the generator breaker of programs in which you can begin to create homeostasis in the body. And when the body comes into this alignment, when we channel life force through the body fluidly without these limiting belief systems, I mean, everything in the body, tension in the muscles, we don't realize how much illness we create in our physical bodies with our thoughts. We have to completely interrupt the patterns of illness thinking, beliefs of illness, helplessness, disconnect, loneliness, unloved. All of these programs have to be interrupted in order to help the body heal. So this is a work of going internally and addressing those subconscious belief systems, and it takes some time and it takes some love and some compassion, but it absolutely can be done. Okay, so I'm going to address the interdimensional aspect, because the interdimensional aspect, I get this question a lot. uh Again, subconscious programs are going to project into these realms. People that are navigating very difficult physical and interdimensional experiences, number one, you are a very high vibrational soul, which means you've had these experiences tenfold. In many lifetimes, you're experiencing them simultaneously. And that means that there's a pattern that you need to break. And it's usually what I see as a pattern of thinking that we are helpless or powerless or don't trust in our abilities. So this has to be addressed, because we need to be able to trust ourselves in all dimensional layers as we access these higher dimensional planes. We need to address the meaning that we apply to them. There is no right or wrong. Essentially, we need to come back to that neutrality and begin to observe from that neutrality as experiences, energetically transmuting everything that we are experiencing as we move along. So I really could go very much deeper
Yeah.
into that. Exactly. Beliefs like I don't deserve well-being. We can go really deep into that. Go ahead, Phil.
Question came in on Facebook talking about huge questions. This came in from Facebook. Is the deprogramming and programming occurring in multidimensionality of viewpoints, experiences, resonance fields of expression, and integration within any one of the fractals automatically, harmonically transferred, implemented in every dimension of experience? Wow, that's another mouthful. But
Yes.
have you noticed in our clinical practices, it seems that so many people are in these states of exaggerated, amplified, magnified fight or flight. And so isn't one of the things that we need to do, we need to give them new options, present to them new response patterns. Have you noticed that in your clinical practice, that actually are rooted in the subconscious? That we need to give them new response patterns instead of the old response patterns that don't work, simply are just not feasible, certainly anymore.
Exactly. And I love that you brought that up, because beloved people, this is the beauty of this human experience. Listen, we inherited belief systems of not love. Our mother, our father, they didn't understand yet what love was. Many of us don't come from enlightened beings. So essentially, we are pioneers in understanding what love is, in the embodiment of love, in the expression of love, in the emanation of love. We are pioneers. So we have to, the patterns that we're breaking, it's going to feel very uncomfortable for quite some time. It's going to feel very new. And so we have to be courageous, and the love for ourselves has to be built and solidified in such a way that we care for this physical body. Remember that every emotion that you feel creates a chemical reaction in the body that either is productive for this vessel or counterproductive. And it also manifests into the things that we're experiencing, either productive experiences or counterproductive experiences. So we have to quickly come to that understanding and take responsibility for our participation in illness and sickness in many dimensional planes. So, to answer that previous question, yes, what you're going to discover is actually that you're running through patterns. So, the same patterns that you're experiencing in your everyday life, you are experiencing in these interdimensional realms, in dream times, in when you're traveling astrally, when you are meeting these interdimensional beings. If we encounter a lot of parasitic interactions, it's because we have parasitic subconscious belief systems against ourselves. So these are things that have to be addressed from the inside out in order to make major shifts. But knowing this helps you understand how powerful you are in the co-creation, in this mechanic of co-creation.
I think a big link came from, you remember Maxwell Maltz? This is N.L.P came out of what was called psycho-cybernetics. Maxwell Maltz was a plastic surgeon. And even though he had made people looking more beautiful externally, they didn't feel better about themselves. And psychocybernetics, which was one of the forerunners of N.L.P, showed us that self-image is everything. If something is contrary to if you have a negative self-image, whatever you're going to do, whatever your intention is going to be filtered through that negative self-image. And it's really not going to serve you. I just wanted to ask you something. Remember the Master Key? This was Charles Harnell's Master Key, originally written in 1916 as a mail order course, and then in 1919 as book form. And it's a series of aphorisms, 24 lessons, 24 weeks, that ultimately teach one to control their thoughts. In aphorism number 2, he says, we're related to the world within. In these few aphorisms, he talks about the relationship of the world within and the world without, that we're related to the world within by the subconscious mind, and that the solar plexus is the organ of this mind. And it is through the subconscious that we're connected with the universal mind and brought into relation with the infinite constructive forces of the universe. And then he goes on to say, it is in the coordination of 2 centers of our being. He's talking about the solar plexus and the brain and the understanding of their functions, which is the great secret of life. And when you read very, very deeply into the signs of getting Wallace Wattles, the signs of getting rich, he goes into the science of gratitude, that gratitude is actually a magnetic force that brings your brain and your solar plexus together in the heart space, where the gratitude is felt, and gratitude and forgiveness and all these attitudes and etiquette of spiritual mastery are the most powerful forces for healing on the planet. And that the subconscious is the key, but that the solar plexus is the gateway to the subconscious. I thought that was very, very interesting, because it seems a lot of the ancient teachings, many of them point to the solar plexus, that grand plexus,
Yeah.
which has more neural connections than the heart and the brain put together.
Yeah.
That if you develop a conscious, co-creative relationship with your solar plexus, you can actually tell the solar plexus how you want to feel. To change the state, that in that moment, the solar plexus can do whatever rewiring is necessary. And of course, the receptor sites in the brain have to be open to receive the neurohormones and the neurochemicals, the translation of which is that emotion that you want to feel.
Absolutely. And I just want to share really quickly this slide. I'm not even going to go into presentation mode. I'm just going to show it to you like this. But essentially, we have 3 main centers. The body is divided into 3: lower dantian, middle dantian, and upper dantian. Okay, so dantian is the center of empowerment. When these, and we're directly talking about the chakra systems, the first, second, and third chakra, which is the centers of the chakras that master the physical plane, just like Phil was just talking about. So when we have this, the emotions, our sexuality, our creative life forces, right? Co-creation, manifestation, and the root chakra, feeling safe in the physical body, feeling safe in your environment. When these 3 are in alignment, when they are balanced, we literally create a center of empowerment in the physical. And it begins to activate the center dantian, which is the heart, the throat, and the third eye, right? So this is the upper unconditional love. This is where we activate the coherence, the unification of the self with the whole, as we were talking about earlier. And the upper dantian are the higher faculties, the crown chakra being the center of manifestation, in which we project into our reality everything that we're experiencing. And essentially, when these centers are activated, they shift our perception, because remember that each chakra projects into the field that creates the perception of our environment. So if you are in a constant state of survival, again, the lower dantian, feelings of helplessness, disconnect, we are seeing red. There's a saying, you see red, but literally your entire experiences, your vibrational frequency creates a resonance in which you are a match to more of the same things, people that are mirroring the same subconscious belief systems as you, relationships, work, careers, like everything you can think of in your life. How you begin to shift that is by beginning to create that coherence, that healing, integration, deprogramming in the lower bodies to begin to activate the higher faculties. Essentially, I teach something called GPAC, grounding, protecting, aligning, co-creating. But this is a very simple way to begin to work with the multidimensional body. When we come into a state of co-creation, our crown is active and it is intentionally aligned with the highest vibrational frequency. We can identify that color in our meditation through uh, refined intuition. Okay. And this is what I do in my sessions, DNA reprogramming. But literally, we begin to shift out of the karmic cyclical patterns that we are inheriting from ancestral lineages encoded in our DNA, embedded in our vessel, and begin to shift into co-creation, which again, you're a pioneer. You are learning how to love, learning how to live in unconditional love, and learning how to master co-creation, mind over matter, which is a completely different state of being, which we're not generally taught how to be. I see a question from Terrence. Do you want to take that question?
Okay, Bob is up with a question,
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Oh.
Sorry.
and then we'll go to Terrence.
Can you hear me okay, Geraldine?
Perfectly.
I wanted to back up to a note that you made, comment you made about free will. And what I wrote down was free will is only in play when in a conscious state. Maybe I wrote that down wrong. But what I observe, what seems to be people and behaviors acting unconsciously, but they would likely say, yeah, but I'm doing whatever I want to because I'm acting out of free will. I don't understand. Can you help me a little bit more with that?
Absolutely. So the thing is that because we inherit majority, so let me put it this way, from the womb until the age of 7, the experience that we had in the womb dictates our perception for our entire life. That's really, really huge. So, for example, if you're in the mother's womb and our mother is feeling constantly afraid or in survival or unsafe, not supported by husband, for example, or feeling trapped, those emotions that are constantly in her mind during the entire 9-month gestation are are creating an environment for the fetus. And when the little fetus is born, the first of all, birth is a very violent experience in which we literally experience a lot of trauma of separation coming from the warmth of that womb. Even if we yet are not quite understanding those emotions that we felt in that environment, most people that I work with on a daily basis remember the leaving that body, the body, or being afraid of coming into the world. Imagine that you are born with that belief system. So from there begins your childhood, your families, and most of our families, of course, are quite dysfunctional. Even if we think we have the most wonderful families, oftentimes there's not a deep, profound understanding of communication, compassion, love, unconditional protection, all these things. And so to the age of 7, it forms our perception. And what happens is that from there emerges what we know as personalities, right? What we know as our identities. We begin to identify. We create survival mechanisms, essentially, in order to navigate the world without the education of understanding what it means to embody those belief systems. Therefore, they become patterns of behavior. And we take everything we learned from mother and father and from anyone else that played a parent role or friend influence, and that becomes who we are into adulthood. So what happens is that we might think that we are choosing freely our choices, and but in reality, our subconscious programs are so profound that they literally go into everything that we are. And so to deprogram means to really get into that, who you are, and see, is it true? Is it true that you know, every time that, let's say, someone turns on the light at the wrong time, you get really angry, for example, the body goes into the survival mode. So the question is like, is it true that you're unsafe in that moment? And then, you start going down that programming to reach the root, and you realize, oh, as a child, there would be fights, arguments, and my father would turn on the light and everyone would be afraid and screaming. So this creates a program. That's your truth and your perception created by that traumatic experience, but that's not the whole truth. You see, so again, these formulate perceptions that are deeply embedded in many aspects of our reactions, the way that we behave, the careers that we choose, partners that we're choosing, everything in our life. But we don't really see that until we begin to do that work. So what I mean by this deprogramming is that it's essential for us to do this shadow work in order to find that 0 point self that is not a product of any kind of influence. And I mean any, including social engineering, everything from the food that we're eating, society, religion, political, culture, the countries that we're born, all of that play an influence in who we think we are, but that's not really the true self. So when we enter into the observer, that 0 point that is nothing and everything simultaneously, that is the center of actual true potential co-creation. And those choices and those actions that we take from that place actually are very different. This is where our relationships kind of start to fall apart, because we begin to realize that, we're not really following along with social norms anymore. We're not behaving the way we used to behave. So many people have these dark nights of the soul where they feel alienated from friends, families, partners. Relationships start to fall apart. But this is necessary because, in order for us to embody, let's say, the new human, which is this coherent self that is completely authentic and living in its complete authenticity, it's a completely different thing, and from there is kind of emerging a love, the real love. This is the love of the self that sees everything as a part of themselves. And that's actual co-creation. This is where we begin to enter into the mastery of being a human, So it's a different kind of way of being. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for walking me through that. Thank you much.
Terrence, you had a question?
Yeah, and thank you, Geraldine, for holding space for us all. I recently heard that phrase of being the observer versus being the absorber. So I'm particularly mindful of some of that language. So thank you for that reminder. My question, and it's, mostly rooted in some direct experience that I've been having. It's just around the concept of ego death and that return to consciousness. Just recently, I'm particularly mindful coming out of, this past full moon and eclipse of, some really strange dreams that I was having, and sort of back to that return to consciousness. Some of my independent work, you mentioned this process of deprogramming and, healing trauma has included, Kundalini breath work, doing like full moon and cacao ceremonies, and then, also just particularly mindful as like my experience as a Black man, sort of tapping into, some of the ancestral trauma. So there's definitely been some relearning in the form of, some of the ancestral religions, particularly around, some of like the Egyptian gods and goddesses. It is, in my opinion, as part of sort of, you talk about this concept of our, I think you said our quantum bodies. Again, apology, I don't know all the syntax in the vernacular, but, in my opinion, or part of the learning that I believe that I've done is just around, Thoth and some of like his godhood and language and communication. And then I've, and embodying that, have been sort of tapping into what I believe is my superpower in language and allowing that to help with the healing process and belief system. So, if you could maybe just talk through this concept of ego death and that return to consciousness and how that sort of impacts our healing process, the healing of the trauma process, I'd be really appreciative.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. So, one of the things that I'm noticing occurring a lot, especially as, in the spiritual community, there's so much overflow of information and things that we have access to, that we sometimes fall into the habit, which is programmed within us deeply, to become identified with things. And one of the things that we learn, and many of the ancient mystery schools talk about this as a core foundation for the spiritual journey, is to understand your relationship with what it means to follow the cycles of life and death. Okay. Becoming friends with death means being able to leave the body and then navigate and travel, let's say in dream state and all these other realms, right? And for many ancient cultures, they trained in this, they studied this. This is essential to people that are practicing their spiritual journey, because you will meet that sooner or later. You need to access that information and know how to navigate these realms. But what happens when we start to navigate these realms and start accessing, past lives, simultaneous aspects of ourselves? A lot of time we are doing the shadow work, but we get caught up in the identification of these things. And what happens is that becomes a death. Every time that we identify ourselves with something, it's our death, because we limit and we want to define. That's the human mind that wants to define ourselves all the time with definitions, names, labels. People get very aligned with certain things that they see and they experience. But one of the things that we need to understand is that we are all and nothing simultaneously. And the journey of unconditional love, unconditional self-love, the embodiment of unconditional self-love, is the journey of understanding that you are nothing and all at the same time. And that might seem confusing, but the problem is that you are so much more, because when as source, you are a fractal of source, and through the fractalization into all of these different dimensional expressions of you, you are not just this vessel. You are all these things that you're experiencing. So we have to continue on our journey, deprogramming from everything you've experienced in this lifetime, and then you go into your simultaneous past lives, and then you're going to start accessing interdimensional aspects of yourself. Through all of that journey, we have to continue coming back to zero, and we have to continue moving beyond the identification of ourselves as things, as names and labels. To me, I feel that is the hardest, but also the most compassionate way to go along this journey. And it's also the most difficult, because of course, we're in this very three-dimensional plane where everything is about labels, and more than ever now, we're having the discussions about names, labels. So this is what happens in this organism, that we are coming into unity. These things have to be addressed. And the higher level that you look at it, from the highest level that you look at these things, the more compassionate it'll be to understand that you're all in nothing at once. This is what it means to embody that infinity that we talked about. It's that you become one, with everything. So that's what I hope I answered that question.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
We have to wrap up soon, but
Yeah.
Geraldine, it's interesting that everything seems to spiral back to the DNA.
Yeah.
That the chemical lenses that allow the dimensionalized portions of our wholeness to embody, everything seems to collapse again or come back. The myth of the eternal return back to the DNA and its function as the transducers of all the languages of light, of all consciousness, that allow the dimensionalized portions of our consciousness to embody in this hologram. in these series of nested holograms that we exist in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. Thank you so much, Phil. It was an honor to be here. Thank you so much for listening and sharing with me today.
Thank you, Geraldine. I'm sure we could have gone on another couple hours with questions, and I know I had some. But I did put in the chat how you can schedule an individual session with Geraldine, and her website, GeraldineOrozco.com. And also, you have a, let me see, in March, you are part of a very significant conference. Could you tell us something a little bit about that?
Biomedical Expo, and it's March 24th to the 26th at the Sonesta Hotel in Los Angeles. It will be in person, so if you are in LA, I would love to see you there. It's going to be a fantastic expo. We're going deep into the science of spirituality, essentially looking at technology and looking at how the inner technology and outer technology. So definitely, please do check that out. I'm also going to be at the, let me just grab a little flyer here. Hold on a second. Portal to Ascension Conference, Humanity Awakens, and this is going to be April 21st to the 23rd. So please do join me there as well. I post all these events on my website, so you can just go ahead and check them out with all the information. So
Yeah, I'll be there too in April.
yes.
And hopefully the biomedical conference also. We'll
Oh,
see.
wonderful.
Oh, you
So
will? Oh, okay. That biomedical conference, I looked at it. The speakers are amazing, as
yes,
are you. You can also register. You can go in person, but it's also available online.
right.
So if, going to LA is not in your budget or whatever, it's very reasonably priced. And I don't know, is a Portal to Ascension, that one is in person, and where is that one?
It's both in person and online as well, and it's in San Diego,
Oh,
actually.
San Diego. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
take San Diego.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And it's been, just amazing, mind blowing. And I'm glad I get to edit this because I'm going to be listening a little closer to everyone tomorrow. And let's bring peace on earth. So thank you so much, Geraldine. Phil, always a blast to be with you, Geraldine. Just
Thank you.
wonderful to meet you.